all of that work. So I'm going to turn it over next to Phil to say a greeting, and then I think we'll move on to checking in with roll call of members here and take it from there.
Thank you, Commissioner. And speaking of data, it's been a terrific fall for VSI. We're very, very busy, and we've been out on the road a lot collecting data, because that's where the answers lie and where actionable insights can be drawn from. And in particular, we've been studying the interaction of the automated vehicle with the lane and the road, and examining the quality of the lane markers within the context of other things that might confuse a system. We also have been doing some research on high contrast lane markers, and it's some of the results are just are very, very interesting. So I definitely hope to get a chance to share that with the council next year. But as I said, it's been a great fall for VSI. We're all healthy, and everything's going well, and hope you are all as well. So back to you, Ben.
Well, thank you both for welcoming us today. And as Thomas Johnson Kaiser put in the chat here, this meeting is open to the public and is recorded and will be available on the Advisory Council website for 1 week after the meeting. Just note that this is being recorded, and you can opt out by exiting the meeting at any time. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right into, here's the agenda, and we will also then call a roll of the council members. So today, the really big items on the agenda are number 3 here, which is looking at CAV in long-range planning. We have Philip Schaffner from MnDOT who will be presenting on that. And we will also have number 5 here, which is updates as it relates to the Innovation Alliance. The Outreach and Education Committee will be giving a pretty robust presentation, and then we'll also have opportunity for council members to have discussion on that presentation and any questions and ideas that come out of that presentation. So with that, I will call roll. And Commissioner,
Present.
You're here, present. Amber Backus.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Great, thank you. Dan Chen.
Present.
Brian Daniel.
Present.
Danielle Elkins.
Here.
Michael Gorman. Okay. John Housladen.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome. Phil, welcome.
Hi again.
Myrna Peterson.
Hello, welcome everyone.
Great. Edward Reynoso.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Damian Reel.
Here, thanks.
Okay. Vicki Rizzolo. Okay, and I know Kyle Shelton from CTS is unable to be here. I believe Gina Boss is representing CTS today. Gina?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome. Brett Weiss?
I'm here as well. Thank you.
Welcome. And Patrick Weldon?
Present.
Great. Well, thank you, council members. And all other participants, including ex officio members, if you'd be willing to write your name and your role, organization, all in the chat for the record, that'd be great. Okay, and with that, one final thing before we dive into the recap of the previous meeting. Commissioner, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to give some updates on the CAVX office. I know there's been some staffing changes that we wanted everyone to be aware of.
Yes, and I think that most council members are aware that Kristen White, who led the office, moved over to ITS America, which is a national organization. She is, I think, serving as the COO of ITS America, and we're sad for MnDOT, happy for Kristen. It's a great opportunity. I hope someday that she will be back at MnDOT in some capacity, but it was quite an opportunity that we couldn't keep her in our orbit the entire time. So we're delighted for her opportunity. Her leaving has made an opportunity for Tara Olds to step up. And so Tara is in the acting executive director role of CAVX. And I think that might be the extent of my knowledge of changes right now. So I'm going to stop.
Thank you, Commissioner. Really appreciate that. And I'd like to just echo, really excited for Kristen and the opportunities I think that that's going to present for our country, and hopefully we benefit from here in Minnesota as well. So looking forward to leading the program here moving forward into 2022. And just wanted to provide a couple other updates that I think we have shared, that Thomas Johnson Kaiser is from the Research and Innovation Office, and he's working with us and helping a lot on the Governor's Advisory Council meetings, whether it's facilitation, setting up things, and sending out meeting notices and summaries. So just want to make sure you all are familiar with his name, and if there's any questions you have regarding the meetings and notes and things that go out, he's always willing to help. And then we also have Scott Schaefer that recently came to our office. He's from the Office of Transportation System Management, and he's really helping us do an assessment of our CAVX strategic plan, looking at those 65 recommendations that we've identified, seeing how far we are, work that we've done as an office, work that we've done as a council, work that other agencies, other MnDOT offices have done to really identify how far we are and maybe what needs to be modified moving into the future. So we're really excited to have both Thomas and Scott on board, helping us with a lot of work that needs to be done.
And do you want to continue on? Because I think you're doing the next section here on previous meeting recap and takeaways.
I am. Thank you, Commissioner. So I'm not going to try to take too much time on this because I know we do have a packed agenda. In our September meeting, we had CAV come and speak to us, telling about a model that they're using in Michigan and that they wanted to share here with Minnesota. And it's my understanding I was unable to actually attend the meeting as I was out sick that day, but a lot of really good conversation, a lot of good discussion and questions that it raised of what we could do in Minnesota and opportunities that we might see. So we look forward to having more conversations like that with partners like CAV, as well as seeing what opportunities there might be moving forward into the future. We also gave some highlights and updates on some CAV projects. So as the Commissioner mentioned, MedCity Mover got off to a public launch over the last couple months, and we've already had over 1,000 riders that have hopped on board. So really exciting with that. We completed our Highway 52 CAV corridor planning study, which has identified some connected vehicle technology ideas that we want to look at trying to implement on Highway 52 over the next several years, with a lot of focus on traffic safety. We've also talked a little bit about the CAV Traveler Alert System, Twin Cities Startup Week partnership that we participated in, and then the CAV Careers Pathway Camp that we partnered with the CTS at the University of Minnesota and White Bear Lake High School, which I will tell you, in a lot of conversation circles I've been in, that has been one of the highlights of the year. Students wanting to get more opportunity to learn about connected and automated vehicle technology and careers. So we're really excited about a lot of the opportunities we've been able to participate in this year. Ben, I will hand it back to you.
Thanks, Tara. And we will now begin the new part of our agenda. So first up is Thomas Johnson Kaiser from MnDOT's CAVX office. He will be presenting on the engagement interviews that he's conducted thus far with CAV Governor's Advisory Council members. Thomas.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so I really had a great opportunity over the last couple of months to meet with the vast majority of the council members, just to chat about how it's going on the council for them, get their feedback, and talk about what their thoughts and priorities are for 2022. The conversation focused on 5 main questions, looking at what top priorities they have for 2022, making sure, seeing if there's a way that we can better support them at MnDOT and the CAVX office, making sure that we are meeting their needs as a council member, getting any ideas or thoughts they have on future topics for the advisory council meetings, and also if they have any ideas for partnership and engagement opportunities. Some of the priorities that were discussed by council members were technology demos, so wanting some more applied work, such as being able to see and feel and interact with the CAV technology, wanting to continue to look at policy and CAV legislation, So in particular, looking around data and personal delivery devices and the idea of how can we continue to educate the legislature on CAV. Outreach and partnerships, in particular, looking at how can we partner with Minnesota businesses, other state DOTs, OEMs, and the CAV impacted workforce. Continuing to look at how CAV will impact the workforce moving forward. Safety came up as a top priority. It continues to be a huge focus area for CAV. We want to make that a top priority. And public engagement and outreach, we're going to see some additional information on that later in the meeting. The vast majority of the meeting is going to be covering this topic and a lot of great plans for 2022 around public outreach and education. And finally, a lot of council members did express the desire to meet in person, recognizing that we've done a really good job with virtual meetings as needed, but just recognizing that there have been some things missing that we can't quite have in the virtual world. So as the pandemic continues to evolve, we'll see what the possibilities are for 2022, but there was a desire from most members to meet in person moving forward if possible. So some of the suggestions for improvement we heard, more interactive meetings. So this ties into that meeting in person idea, just that it is a little bit more difficult in these virtual settings to have that interaction and discussion and conversation that can happen in person. So really looking at a way to make these meetings not just presentations, but have that discussion and interaction and make these meetings as beneficial as possible for folks. So we'll continue to look at ways to improve that moving forward if we are in the virtual world. Wanting to have some clear, tangible results and accomplishments for the advisory council, recognizing that we are coming up 2022 into election year, and that at the end of Walz's term, Governor Walz, that we're going to want to have some very clear, tangible results and accomplishments we can show that this advisory council was able to accomplish. Looking to continue to clarify the relationship between the Advisory Council and Innovation Alliance. Should the Advisory Council be providing more direction to the Innovation Alliance? So that'll be something we'll look at moving forward. And also continue to provide clear communication and more engagement between meetings. So some council members felt wondering if quarterly meetings is the right cadence for this group, if we need to meet more, have some additional opportunities for interaction between the meetings. So that's something we're going to look at, some potential optional meetings in between these meetings that could be focused on specific topics to make sure we're moving things forward. Next slide, please. Thanks, Ben. And then finally, just some hot topics that came up throughout my discussions. A lot of great ideas from the council members. Some of the top ones were national level information. So looking at federal legislation, what's happening with FHWA or NHTSA. So that is definitely a topic that we'll be wanting to look at moving forward. I have a brief update on that later in the meeting today, but something we'll for sure dive into more in 2022. Continue to look at accessibility in automated vehicles. So how can we continue to ensure that automated vehicles will be accessible for everyone? Once again, safety issues are a really hot topic for folks, especially as things pop up in the news regarding safety and automated vehicles that we'll want to make sure we're having those discussions. Cold weather technology. So as Minnesota trying to find our niche in CAV, how can we partner with others that are have similar climate to us, such as Northern Europe, and continue to advance how to make sure the technology works in cold weather and CAV related businesses. So the idea of should we convene a group of Minnesota businesses that are in the CAV space and make sure that we're helping have as much success as possible and see if there's anything we can do to support those businesses. So it was a really great conversation with all the council members, so appreciate your time. We're always open to hearing your thoughts and feedback, so please reach out to Tara or myself at any time. Always willing to have discussions and continue to try and make these meetings and this experience as beneficial for everyone as possible.
Thank you, Thomas. And just a note to council members, that feedback that you've provided will continue to be incorporated as we move into 2022. So as Thomas mentioned, thank you all for your participation as he's reached out. And if you have not had an opportunity to talk with him, please reach out to him, or if you have any follow-up from your previous comments. Okay, well, our next presentation today is from Philip Schaffner, who's MnDOT's Transportation Programming Director. He is going to be giving a presentation on connected and automated vehicles in long-range planning. So, Philip, I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting and have you take over.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Philip Schaffner, Director of Statewide Planning at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Great to be with you again to talk about our update of the statewide multimodal transportation plan. It was at the July meeting, and there we talked a little bit about some of the scenario planning work that we did for connected and automated vehicles in 2018 and 2019. Talked a little bit about the statewide multimodal transportation plan that I'm going to talk more about today and what it is. We talked a little bit about our efforts to define transportation equity. And then we spent some time in small groups talking about some of our draft investment strategies for connected and automated vehicles in the 20-year Minnesota State Highway Investment Plan that we are also in the process of updating. Since then, we had originally planned to come in the fall meeting and spend a lot more time talking about the 20-year highway investment plan. We've hit pause on our update of that to do some additional review and analysis of our estimate of needs on the state highway system, and also now to help adjust and integrate the new bipartisan infrastructure law, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA. So we've hit kind of pause on that and are going back and making sure we're accounting for those new federal programs and funds, and we'll be going out and doing engagement on the investment direction in that plan next spring and next summer. But today I wanted to revisit and share some updates on the statewide multimodal transportation plan. As a reminder, this is a 20-year plan developed by MnDOT, but it's a plan that covers all forms of transportation and extends to all transportation partners in the state. It connects with our 16 legislative goals that are established in statute and provides overarching objectives, strategies, actions, and performance measures for all modes of transportation in the state. It also includes a short-term work plan for MnDOT. We update it every 5 years, and our next update is due next year, and we're in the process of sort of in late stages of updating this plan. Anticipate having a draft out in a couple of months for public review and comment. When we look at the last plan, last time we updated it was in 2017. As it relates to what we did for connected automated vehicles, we had a detailed trend analysis at the time of what we were seeing in the industry. There was a lot of excitement in 2015, 2016 about this technology. But the plan itself was a little light on specific references. So we have kind of a brief mention of connected automated vehicles in one of our strategies, which was to implement strategic engineering and technology solutions to improve transportation safety. And really what we did in the 2017 plan was talk about this as a trend and then make a commitment before we updated the plan again to study and work with transportation partners to prepare for connected automated vehicles. And we've done a ton of that through the creation of the CAV office, through the creation of various councils and advisory groups, studies and pilot projects. And we've learned a lot since the 2017 plan. And this time we wanted to go further with our work, although this is a high-level plan. So we're not necessarily going to repeat and pull in all of the strategies in the strategic plan. We can reference all of that work, but we did want to be a little bit more explicit with this plan as it relates to connected and automated transportation. We have been looking at what other states have been doing. And we sent out a survey to our other state partners across the country and have been looking at their plans to see how do other states account for and include connected automated vehicle readiness or connected automated vehicle technology in their long-range transportation plans. Every state has to develop a 20-year plan. And as it exists today, less than half of states actually even include a strategy for CAV in their plans. And those that do, it's usually at a very high level. There are very few states that go into any detailed discussion or detailed strategies in their long-range plans today. Like Minnesota, there are only about a dozen states that have conducted some scenario planning related to connected automated vehicles. Many states have expressed an interest in this, but most states have not yet conducted scenario planning. And we have not found any states that have CAV-related performance measures, which is something we've been talking about and wanting to develop. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can kind of borrow from any other states here that have developed this yet. Again, several have talked about a desire to do so, but we have not yet identified any that have. We've also been talking, doing our public and stakeholder involvement over the last year and a half related to the plan, and some of that has been specific to connected automated vehicles. We have heard a desire for us to continue to be proactively leading and planning for connected automated vehicles. We have also heard a strong desire for MnDOT and other transportation agencies to be sure that as we are developing and implementing strategies related to automation, that we should be making sure that our strategies also benefit human drivers and other users of the transportation system. So I think it was referenced earlier, maybe Phil mentioned it, about retroreflectivity and some of our lane markings and other signs. We know that also has benefits for human operators in addition to machine vision and algorithms. So that's kind of makes sense to do for technology. It also makes sense to do for the human drivers. So good approach for us to follow that. There was sort of a cautionary note and a desire for us to think iteratively. We update this plan every 5 years. It gives us an opportunity to revise and adjust as we learn more. We've certainly learned a lot since the last plan. And so there's a desire to maintain some flexibility here and maybe not to overcommit to certain strategies, to continue to be thoughtful about what makes sense to do today and maybe what makes sense to continue to study and we can commit to in 5 years from now. Clear indication and desire for MnDOT to be taking the lead on this, but also not wanting a patchwork approach to some of this, recognizing there'll be pilot projects, but as we think about wider scale deployment, needing to be mindful about what this might mean in different community contexts. A lot of concern from our rural partners in small cities and towns about if there is an expectation for certain types of support technology or things like wider lane markings or other things, are they going to be able to participate and update and maintain it at the level, for example, that the state might be able to, recognizing that the transportation system needs to function as a complete and integrated system. So some concerns there. And then, of course, a strong interest in making sure that we are maintaining an equity focus on this work related to this and all of our planning and implementation efforts. So working with CAVX office, Tara and others and other partners and stakeholders, we have drafted a strategy specific to connected automated vehicles and a set of actions that would support that strategy. Broadly, it's to promote the development and deployment of connected and automated transportation technologies, including piloting technologies and different business models to maintain flexibility in a changing market, to design our roads to support current and new technology with proven safety benefits for all users, including human drivers, use CAV technology to improve transportation equity and accessibility for all Minnesotans and to reduce transportation disparities, to improve work zone safety by leveraging CAV technologies and data, and to advance CAV research and data collection to address Minnesota challenges and opportunities. We also have a call out and action, sort of a supporting action to support fiber optic and communication technology to help with access operations and safety improvements in the transportation system. That would also be a supporting action related to connected automated vehicles. We have talked about some performance measures. We have a long kind of wish list of things that would be great if we had data on, or might be good to collect data on. But most of them feel like they're not quite ready. One that we have talked a little bit about as a possible performance measure might be to look at our signals, either the percent of them or the percent of our corridors that are maybe broadcasting their phase and timing as sort of a readiness measure as one possible metric. Again, this is kind of in the possible category. Very open to other thoughts or ideas about other measures we could be exploring or developing. I know Tara and the CAVX office have a long list too of things they've talked about. It would be great to be able to measure. But again, this one felt like maybe it would be at the place we could start to track this, potentially setting a target for having widespread use of signals that are doing this and would be a supporting measure of our readiness for this technology for widespread use. So with that, I'm going to pause and see what questions you have, or if you have reactions to these strategies and actions, and curious to hear your thoughts and questions.
Thanks, Philip. Yeah, we actually have until 2:45, so we have a few minutes here. Council members, if you would like to follow up with a question or comment, just raise your hand or jump in if there's no one else speaking at this time.
Yeah, hi, thank you. This is Patrick. Couple of questions. Tie back your possible measures of merit or proposed metric to your proposed CAV strategy and action. How does the signal phasing and timing address your strategy? What are you trying to measure?
Yeah, this is related to some of the supporting technologies that allow, for example, connected vehicles or automated vehicles to adjust their speed, potentially slow down in advance of a yellow or red, or potentially maintain speed. It's a general kind of operational metric. It's something we've been testing on the Highway 55 corridor. Several other states, although they don't have specific measures for it, have been trying to use broadcast or have more signals that are broadcasting this. So it's a general like promoting the deployment of connected vehicles as a supporting technology that is something we can track and have done some work on. There's a national challenge called the SPAT challenge that I think AASHTO, our National Association of State Transportation and Highway Officials, has sort of put out for all states to have at least a few of these out there on the system. Tara or others maybe could give a little bit more explanation, but it's a general measure of something we could be doing to promote the deployment of this in our infrastructure.
And one thing I'll just follow up with on that, Philip, is I think one thing that Philip mentioned that's really hard in this space is that, there are no other performance measures for other states. And when you actually look at what are proven CAV safety measures, that's a really hard thing to actually answer. If we had a list of those, I think we'd all be investing in those today, but what it works for one company might not work for the next, or what works for one technology might not work for the next. What works for human drivers is also that focus that we're trying to move forward with. So I think, as Philip mentioned, it's a possible performance measure, and we're looking to try to identify how we can best what are the best performance measures for our state based on our investments, our goals, and things like that. So Patrick, appreciate that question and recognize that there's some challenges with tying it back always, but
the second question, it should be an easy one, and let me give you a softball. Proposed CAV strategy with actions. How does that tie to the past 3 years of developing a strategy with vision and actions, and what are we doing here?
Yeah, so Patrick, part of the deal is this is an overarching plan for kind of all forms of transportation. It's a high-level plan that covers broad strategies and then supports more detailed planning. And we've got 65 actions right in a strategic plan that we're going to reference. So this was intended to be an overarching support strategy with some broad actions to support that in this plan, in support of more detailed planning efforts with this particular plan. So it's a very high level plan. And this was the intention of continuing to support that work and put out some high-level actions here to continue to work on with this, not to replace some of the more detailed planning.
So how does it match with what we've done over the past 3 years, now almost 4? Tell me how these two mesh together.
So Patrick, one thing that might help everyone is to drop the last statewide plan into the link so you can see kind of what we're talking about here in terms of this overarching plan. I think that what we do at MnDOT is that a plan like that's been developed with CAVX will be embedded into the plan, but maybe not all 60 some items directly. It'll be a link to this plan. There will be a high level sort of takeaway into this larger transportation plan, because this is our kind of the North Star plan that we use going forward at MnDOT. And so it's not possible to put every single item in, but it's also important to capture all the work that's been done over the last 3 years and acknowledge that work. Does that help?
Yep, that answers the question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
See, Brett, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question. You went over it very quickly, but you said something along the lines of fiber to support CAV, and that's been a pretty interesting conversation that Jay Hibbis and I have been having, and we've got some meetings set up with some fiber owners, broadband owners, to talk about this in more detail. Can you tell me could you replay that again? Because I didn't really see it on here, but yet you mentioned it.
Yeah, and it's and I mentioned it as a kind of a supporting action that's not explicitly tied to CAV. So it's to expand fiber optic and communications infrastructure for access, safety, and operational benefits. And we use a lot of that to tie into a lot of our intelligent transportation systems to support our signals or to support our cameras or other infrastructure. It has at least the potential, right, of supporting, and as we talked about in July, right, there's a lot of questions about the direct connection to connected automated technology, but we do view it as a potential supporting technology here, and that's why it's not on the slide, but I did want to reference it as elsewhere in the plan. We do talk about expanding the access for broadband and or communication infrastructure and fiber optics.
Okay, and that's tied in, as I know in speaking with Jay, that there was a study that was partially done and still being worked on, but that's going to be kind of a loose recommendation in some ways with more definition put around it going forward, correct?
That's my understanding. Tara could probably elaborate.
That's about that's a great way to put it, Brett.
Okay.
We're working on tying it up.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have time for at least one more question from the council. Feel free to jump in or raise your hand. Okay, not seeing or hearing any at this time. Philip, do you have any final words on this?
No, just appreciate the opportunity and would welcome if you have additional thoughts or would like to schedule a more detailed conversation with me or my team. Very happy to do so. Contact us here. I'll send these slides out, or they'll go out with the meeting notice. And again, happy to schedule a follow-up conversation if you'd like to go into greater detail on this or any other subject related to the plans.
Well, thank you. Oh, and it looks like Brett has a follow-up there.
Yep.
But yes, thank you, Philip, for your presentation. All right. We're moving into our next topic here today. So next up, we have, hold on a moment here. We have a preview of the federal infrastructure bill, well now law, as it relates to CAV. And so Tara Olds will be providing an update on one particular thing that's already has already stood out within this new law. Tara?
Thanks, Ben. So as I'm sure we've all heard, really exciting with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act bill that passed. It's the largest long-term investment in American infrastructure in nearly a century. So we're really excited about the bipartisan support that it's had and the impact it's going to have here on Minnesota. Going to give some high-level overview of some information that we know to date, and then one potential program that I want to highlight that I think has some really good opportunities for partnerships. But I will note that I'm sure there will be a lot more, and I'm sure perhaps even the commissioner and other folks on the call today might have other information. So this is just supposed to be, excuse me, just intended to be a little bit of a tidbit of information to get us thinking about it. And we plan on having more in-depth conversations in 2022. As you can see on the screen here, we plan on even having a workshop with some of our Governor's Advisory Council members and ex officio members as an optional meeting if they'd like to brainstorm different ideas for partnerships with funding that might come out of this. So we're anticipating about $4.5 billion to come to Minnesota over the next 5 years. So a lot of opportunity for some new projects or helping to move forward in efforts that we've seen be priority within our state. We know that it transforms federal and state transportation partnerships, and it's including new aspects of definition of transportation, including carbon reduction, climate resiliency, restorative justice, broadband, and electric vehicle infrastructure into the surface transportation reauthorization framework. So a lot of the initiatives that we know are important to our state, important to this council that you guys have all identified. So that's really exciting as well. I wanted to note too that MnDOT's going to be eligible to compete for some funding, leverage different partner and relationships to get grants and other types of funding. So we're excited to see where that could lead. And we're anticipating a substantial amount of funding to be identified, or that is identified particularly for broadband funding, for EV related infrastructure, for cybersecurity, expansion of research on connected and automated vehicles, some performance standards for crash avoidance with CAVs, and research on driver distraction, disengagement, and complacency. So some of the traditional grants like RAISE and Infra are also in there, and we're seeing overall we're seeing a substantial increase in funding compared to the FAST Act as well. One note that I'll note that our partners at FHWA informed me is that the administration has a strong focus on getting cities and counties to be more engaged in CAV. So we're hoping that we have an opportunity as the state to bring in our 87 counties and the cities in our state to participate more. I know we have some representatives as ex officio members, as well as members on the council, and we have some partnerships with other projects throughout the state with some cities and counties. We meet with the Minnesota County Engineers CAV Committee, as well as the City Engineers Minnesota Association Traffic Safety Committee, and talk about CAV frequently. So there's lots of opportunities, and we're excited to see where that leads. So with regards to a potential opportunity that we wanted to highlight today, it is the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation Grant Program, also known as the SMART Grant. So this was established really for demonstration projects and it's focusing on smart cities and community technologies and systems, helping to improve efficiencies and safety. I noted there's some selection criteria on the screen here that we just wanted to highlight. So there's not exactly sure the exact details of those, but there will be some things that we'll want to focus on if we identify some partnerships to look at potential funding. Some of the benefits we're looking at trying to achieve with this program would be to improve access to jobs, education, and essential services, including healthcare, and also to incentivize private sector investments or partnerships that conclude working with mobile and fixed telecommunication service providers as to the extent practicable. Additionally, there's some eligible projects that are noted on here, including coordinated automation, which is the use of automated transportation and autonomous vehicles, while working to minimize the impact of accessibility of other user groups and modes of travel. Connected vehicles, which we've been doing a lot of work over the last several years here in our state, including that Highway 52 program and planning project I mentioned that Corey Johnson from our office led. And this is really looking at how vehicles send and receive information regarding vehicle movements and along the corridors. Intelligent sensor-based information, smart technology, traffic signals. So one of those that Philip even mentioned with SPAT phasing or signal phasing and timing as being one of those aspects of smart technology and traffic signals. So overall, a lot of opportunities that we're seeing that will come out of this bill, but there will be some specific to CAV as well. And this is one grant that we're hoping to dive into a little bit more, identify some potential opportunities, and it might allow some opportunities for us to partner with some local agencies a little bit more too. So like I noted, we're going to have a meeting in February that we're planning on having as a workshop to really brainstorm some ideas. We'll probably talk about this grant as well as some other funding opportunities that might be coming about related to CAV. So stay tuned for more, and we look forward to having some conversations. And I'll pause and see if the commissioner or anyone else from MnDOT wanted to add anything with regards to some of the infrastructure bill overview.
So if I could add, I think one of the important, you may hear February and think, wow, that's a long ways from now. But what's happening and what has happened is that although the infrastructure bill has passed, and we're very excited about this, it is about a 30% increase in formula funding coming to Minnesota. There are some new programs that will directly feed into MnDOT. There's also a number of grant opportunities. Tara talked about one of those. The thing that has not happened is the actual appropriation. And so that is what we're all waiting for. And that appropriation language is sitting in the Build Back Better bill. And so that's why we're really talking about now we probably will not, until Build Back Better passes or another appropriation bill, we will not be seeing money flowing directly into the state. So it has bought us a little bit of time to be able to do, I think, a little more thoughtful input and planning, and particularly with these grant programs where we will be competitively applying and competing, we have a little extra time to be able to put some focus on those. So, we'll be looking for multi-jurisdictional partners on some of these grants. That will make for a stronger application. So just kind of getting some things going. The other thing that we could probably drop into the chat here is the Transportation Alliance in partnership with MnDOT and others are doing a workshop next week where we will be presenting more information, as will the Met Council, about what we expect out of the federal legislation. And some of you may want to attend that. There's both an in-person and virtual option with that, and I think it's on the 16th. So I just share that with you, the overall context of kind of what we're dealing with here. And really appreciate Tara giving a quick update with a lot more to come into 2022.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I did put that a link to the registration if anyone's interested in attending that Transportation Alliance workshop.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that update. And we're doing really well on time. So this is good because we're now entering a part of the agenda where there will be opportunity for more robust discussion after a couple presentations. So as you all are aware, the Governor's Advisory Council helped set the strategic direction and guidance for CAV in Minnesota. And over the last year or so, or 2 years, there has been the creation of what's called the Innovation Alliance, which many of you are participants in, that are each focused on different areas that you as the Governor's Advisory Council have had set, way back when, maybe 2.5 years ago, set that guidance on kind of the focus areas. And so today we're going to have a presentation update on one of those Innovation Alliance groups, specifically the Outreach and Education Committee. We have both of the co-chairs of that committee, Gina Boss and Katie Caskey, who will be presenting on what that committee has been doing, and we'll end with some questions to you, and have we'll get to it, the logistics of this, but we'll do some breakout rooms where there's an opportunity to discuss a little bit deeper. So Tara, I'll have you introduce Gina and Katie.
Thank you, Ben. So I'm going to give a quick overview about what the Innovation Alliance Outreach and Education Committee has been up to, how they've kind of formulated themselves and organized. And then Katie Caskey, the Strategic Communications Manager from HDR, who's been working on our messaging and engagement plan work and leading one side of our committee in this effort, will provide an update on what's happening there. Really exciting news, and I know we've already been putting a lot of the work that's come out of that plan into action. And then I believe Gina Boss, from the Associate Director of Engagement and Education at the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota, who's our other co-chair of the committee and leading up some of our demonstrations and engagement work, will share a little bit of information that we're looking at doing for 2022 demonstration plans, along with Ashley Hudson of Bolt and Make. So we're really excited with the interaction we've had over the last year and the participation from a number of different folks from a number of different areas in transportation. It's been really exciting to see where we're going. So before we hand it over to Katie to share some of the updates there, just wanted to share what some of the committee priorities are. So we've really identified that there's two main priorities, or two main groups for the priorities of this committee. And the first one is to really look at how can we message and communicate the information most clearly. A few of the top 3 priorities that we're looking at doing is to develop messaging materials. That's a lot of the work that Katie Caskey's team's been doing in coordination with WSB over the last 2 years. We're looking at what are some general talking points we can share, so that if I'm going out talking to someone about connected and automated vehicles, and then Ben's going to somewhere else in the state, we're making sure we're sharing the same information in ways that people are able to digest it as well as possible. Creating a CAV dictionary, creating one-on-one presentations that people can help share, as we don't always have to be the ones providing the information, and then creating some additional handouts or other web-based materials that might help people understand what CAV is. One of the main goals that the Governor's Advisory Council has given us for the last couple of years is to focus on education and outreach to ensure that the people of Minnesota understand what CAV is, what it is not, so that we know how we can create a future that really meets their needs from a transportation system moving forward. So really excited about the opportunities there. We're also looking at updating our Destination CAV newsletter. As you might have noticed, we had one go out between our last 2 meetings, and so we'll be refining that here into the next year, addressing some of the needs that we hear from our audiences, but also using it as a tool to help communicate a lot of the work that this council's been doing, as well as the Innovation Alliance. Another aspect that we're doing with messaging is developing tools and resources for our MnDOT CAV website. We've been told by a number of people we have a lot of information on our website and it's hard to find some of it. So we're going to be looking at how can we restructure that, how can we organize it in a way that's friendly, digestible for all audiences, the general public, for our local agencies, and other folks that might be interested in partnering here in Minnesota. Now, if we look at those next 3, those are really focusing on the demonstration side, opportunities for engagement with people here in Minnesota. So the first one is to plan future public demonstrations. As Commissioner mentioned, as we started off this meeting, Med City Mover, our first urban live downtown environment shuttle has been taking place, and it's really exciting to be getting that opportunity to share the technology with people, learn some experiences about how the technology is working here in Minnesota, but mostly just expose people to that technology. We find that the more people that are exposed, and I don't want to steal Katie's thunder here, but when people are exposed to the technology, they're more interested in it. It doesn't mean that they're always going to fall in love with it. It does tend to lean more towards acceptance because they understand it. But the goal of it is really to just make sure that they know what it is, so that as we start to understand what the impacts are, we can make sure that those impacts are in the most positive way possible. So we're looking at who are the people that need to be getting these demonstrations, getting that exposure the most. So there's a group that's been planning that, as well as looking at how we can plan for a CAV annual conference and tech showcase. Our goal was to host one in 2021. Unfortunately, COVID, as we can say, for a number of different things with engagement has impacted that, but we are going to be trying to move forward and plan something, hoping that we can have an in-person venture for that. So you'll learn a little bit more about some of those committee works as we go through the conversation, but I just wanted to kind of share how we're organizing it and focusing on these 6 different priorities primarily, but in kind of 2 different sections. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Katie Caskey, who's going to share some really great works that we've learned over the last year and how we're looking at applying that moving forward.
Thanks, Tara, and thank you all for having me here today to kind of talk through what we've been working on. And so what I'm going to cover is a lot of work that's been going on for about 2 years now with a lot of different partners, including myself and my team from HDR, as well as WSB, New Publica, several different offices of MnDOT, as well as all the partners on the Outreach and Education Committee that was part of the CAV Alliance. And so what we're working on with the CAVX office right now is bringing all of that work together into some documentation and case studies and next steps, and kind of putting kind of the bow on the planning for all this engagement and outreach and guidance, and then being able to transition more to implementation. So with that, I just wanted to kind of touch on kind of all the different things that have been in the works here. And really, we started about 2 years ago now with a lot of work that was about understanding the context. You know, what are peer agencies and what has MnDOT done related to communications and engagement around CAV? What has the media, both social and traditional media in Minnesota, been saying about CAV? What is that conversation that's already happening, that's already out there? As well as looking at data about how people in Minnesota consume information, where they get their information, how they participate in government, just to kind of help set the stage for how to best connect with people about these new technologies going forward. We then transitioned to kind of engaging Minnesotans, bringing people into the conversation about connected and automated vehicles and how they want to be involved, what they want to know. We did that through a statewide baseline survey, as well as several follow-up interviews, both with members of the public as well as with a lot of partners and stakeholders. And then there was a stakeholder working group kind of throughout this as well. We kind of then took all of that information, that background and kind of that engagement, and brought it together to kind of understand the audiences that exist in Minnesota, as well as kind of what's in the works now, which is these last 3 parts of this process. And that's really identifying guidance and recommendations for how to connect for messaging and engagement, how to connect with people in Minnesota about connected and automated vehicle technology. Creating real kind of tools for project managers and practitioners that can help, help us with our communications and engagement goals, as well as starting to implement some of this. And you'll note that there's kind of these last 3 steps are all kind of happening in tandem. We didn't wait for the guidance to come out with a perfect bow on it before we started doing some of this and before we just started putting it in action. So these last 3 steps have kind of been happening in unison, and the implementation one will just continue moving forward as well. So kind of what were we thinking about as we started this project is part of what we really wanted to understand was, what do Minnesotans currently think of CAV? What terminology do they know? What resonates with people? What are they excited about? What are they concerned about? What do they want to know about? What questions do they have? What should the state's role be? How do people want to be involved? And kind of what does all of that mean for how we go about communicating and engaging with people about CAV? So these were kind of our guiding questions that we are looking to answer with all of the work that I'll be sharing here and that Gina will be sharing as well. So just really quick touching on kind of what we learned from all of that background research piece. From the peer agency interviews, we really learned kind of a lot of information about preferred language, how to frame the conversation, what has been successful in other places in terms of how to connect with people, as well as themes that other states or regions have heard as they've talked to people about connected and automated vehicles. From the media review, we got a sense of what Minnesotans are already saying about CAV. What are the current conversations? Where are they occurring? Who's talking about it? What are some of the key words and sentiments that are being expressed? And from the data review, we kind of learned how to connect with Minnesotans, how people use technology, where they get their media, and kind of just trends in civic participation. From the engagement standpoint, from kind of the survey and the interviews, I'll share a little bit about kind of the survey first. This would have been in summer and fall of 2020. We conducted a statewide survey to kind of set the baseline of what do Minnesotans know about CAV and how do they feel about it. So we heard from about 2,200 people and then followed up with 31 of them with kind of more in-depth questions. And we got pretty good representation around the state geographically and amongst a number of different demographic characteristics, though there are a few that were kind of underrepresented that we'll talk about a little bit later and kind of have some recommendations for how to proceed forward with that. So just some of the key top takeaways for you all. People are much more familiar with automated than with connected. 88% of Minnesotans had at least some familiarity with automated vehicle as a term, and only about 69–70% were familiar with kind of connected vehicle as a term. Self-driving vehicles was by far the most familiar term for people. And so just to kind of note that I think there's some work to do for kind of connected vehicles, and, bring in more knowledge and information to people about those.
Not necessarily.
Okay. The people, generally speaking, though, people felt really positively about CAV. About 68% of Minnesotans had at least somewhat positive feelings about CAV. This isn't to say they didn't also have some concerns, but this number tends to be a little bit higher than some of the national surveys that we've looked at. So that I think is kind of an interesting insight as we think about how to connect with people. And 58% of people that responded to our survey said that they would be kind of comfortable riding in a connected and automated vehicle. We did see some differences. We asked people questions about kind of their current transportation use and kind of the different modes that they used. And we did see some differences in terms of people's excitement for CAV based on kind of their current transportation modes that they use or that they own. But of note, 51% said that they would be comfortable sharing the road with a connected and automated vehicle. So we dug a little bit deeper to ask kind of the why. So when we asked people what they were excited about, we wanted to know more about kind of why they were excited. And really the key theme that came up for kind of why people are excited were just potential for safety benefits, as well as being just general supporters of new technology. Kind of secondary themes that we heard less often, but still regularly, were potential for traffic and mobility improvements, potential for equity and accessibility improvements, as well as quality of life, getting time back from driving. And we heard kind of similar things across the surveys and the interviews, safety benefits, increasing access for people who can't drive, getting time back from driving. So those are kind of some of the key themes that we heard in conversations with people about why they're excited about CAV. So when we asked why they were concerned about CAV, kind of the main reasons we heard in the survey were about being skeptical of the technology, as well as potential for downsides of safety, as well as just people that like driving, want to keep driving, have fond memories of driving and don't want to give that up. In the interviews, we heard a little bit more varied, a little bit more detailed, nuanced responses, but some of the things people were concerned about were giving up control or choice, cybersecurity, privacy, kind of concerns that other people wouldn't know how to use the technology, kind of leading back to some safety concerns. Some concerns that this would divert investment from transit, bicycling, and walking. Just general kind of distrust of the technology or not knowing enough, as well as a lot of comments about how would this work in a Minnesota winter. So some other key takeaways just from the survey, as Tara kind of mentioned before, there was a pretty strong correlation between people's familiarity with CAV and how excited they were for it. That kind of tells us that exposure to CAV and increasing people's knowledge and familiarity with it is a way to build excitement. We also heard from most people that they want to continue to be informed and involved. There was appetite for, being involved, being part of the conversation. And generally, people saw a role for government having in planning and preparing for CAV, especially as it relates to safety. So taking all of that information, as well as a whole bunch of other kind of background information and conversations, wanted to share a little bit about kind of some guidance about the different CAV audiences that exist in Minnesota. And from a messaging and engagement standpoint, this really helps us understand, who are we trying to connect with and what does that mean for the different tactics and strategies and messaging and themes that we want to convey. So from a partner and industry standpoint, we kind of split the audience analysis into two pieces, one looking at partner and industry audience and one looking at kind of more public audiences, because the needs and the differences or the needs and the kind of knowledge and were different amongst those different groups. But from a partner and industry audience standpoint, there's kind of identified 3 different kind of types of partner and industry audiences. That'd be champions and decision makers, and those are people who have some sort of formal or informal power, influences and advisors, as well as participants and observers. And just a note that the role that an individual person or group might play at the program level might be different than at the project level. Somebody could be maybe an influencer at the program level, but on a specific CAV project, they might be a champion or a decision maker if it's in their area. So just to note that these are categories to help us understand how to connect with people, but they're not necessarily static. It's not like I'm only this one and only ever this one. And the same is true for public audiences. We kind of summarized the 4 most common perspectives that we heard. And we heard a lot of different perspectives, but we started to see some themes that kind of clustered around kind of these 4 different takes on CAV in Minnesota. And an individual person might identify with more than one of these. I think personally, I know I can see myself in at least a couple of them. And so they're not exclusive groups, but they are ways to help us understand what do people care about related to CAV, what do they want to know, and how best to connect with them. And so I'll just quickly touch on these 4 perspectives. And the kind of CAV cautious or the information seeker audience is by far the most common perspective. That most people in Minnesota had at least a flavor of this in the conversations that we had. And this is really people looking for more information, specifically around safety, winter weather, how the technology works. And our recommendation is to use this as kind of the baseline for communications because it is the most common. And as we think about focus of messaging, this really should be on the technology and how it works. And this group is interested in kind of the personal impacts or kind of how this relates to their life. Another perspective is kind of the CAV confident. And these are really kind of people who are on board, they're familiar with CAV, they're excited about it, and they want to help promote it. And there's a lot of value here in these audiences to kind of set them up as champions. And so making sure they have the information to be successful and be helping to spread the word within their communities. And focus of messaging for this group is still on that technology. That's what they're excited about. That's what they're interested in. But it's much more community focused. It's much more looking at societal benefits, societal impacts, and things that they can help share with their community. The CAV caregiver perspective is kind of the most negative perspective that we heard. And it's not saying that it's against CAV. It's kind of skeptical in a lot of ways. This group isn't necessarily large in number, but was really vocal and had a lot of strong opinions. And really the focus of this group is that they need to build trust with this group. These folks are interested in how CAV can impact the community and making sure that CAV technology is bringing positive impacts to their community. And so the focus of messaging for them, they care less about the technology itself and how it works and more about the potential implications of it. And again, with that kind of community focus. We also heard from a lot of folks that kind of would fall in what we're calling a CAV critical perspective. And these are folks that are really historically under prioritized in transportation decision making. This group is more indifferent than negative. They might even be excited about CAV, but they just really don't feel that it will apply to them. And so really relationship building and kind of showing them that we are designing a system, designing a future, and looking at the technology with them in mind is important when we think about messaging and engagement. So in terms of messaging with this group, focus more on the impacts, but make it more personal. It's about involving them and kind of their experiences. So these are kind of the 4 types of perspectives that exist in Minnesota. And again, somebody can identify with more than one of these. So I encourage you all to think about, did any of these descriptions resonate with you? And so for that CAV critical perspective, we identified some priority populations, and these are groups that are kind of more likely than average to hold that perspective. And you can see that there's a lot of groups here that are those kind of traditionally underrepresented groups in transportation decision making. And so as we think about ways to connect with people and priorities for kind of who to connect with and who to do communications and engagement and demonstration projects with, these are kind of some of the core kind of priority populations that will be informing some of our next steps in terms of public-facing engagement and communications. So bringing it all together, kind of building off that audience analysis, we wanted to kind of bring everything we learned from the background research, from the survey, as well as from the audience analysis, kind of say, what does that mean for where we go next? And we are in the process of kind of finalizing a number of kind of deliverables of documents that will be available hopefully around the end of the year for folks to review and kind of see. But I wanted to give you a preview about what's going to be inside of some of them. So we're developing a CAV messaging and engagement guidance document that really looks at kind of how should we talk about CAV and connect with Minnesotans going forward. And in that document, there will be messaging and engagement goals, more information about the different audiences, as well as kind of messaging guidance, guidance for informing engagement, and some recommended communications and engagement tactics. And so just real quick, a preview of some of those things. Messaging and engagement goals. There are kind of 3 core goals we identified as part of this work. One is to build knowledge of CAV technology throughout Minnesota, so people have the information they need to help shape the future of transportation in the state. Also looking at developing 2-way lasting relationships with communities, organizations, and entities to create a CAV-ready environment in Minnesota and build trust in Minnesota's CAV program. And lastly, to integrate Minnesota's CAV messaging and engagement into transportation plans, projects, and other related communication across partners to promote clarity, consistency, and understanding among all audiences. And so when we think about all of the communication and engagement work that we want to do moving forward, it's all in service of helping to do these 3 things. And not everything might touch on all 3, but the things we prioritize going forward from a communications and engagement standpoint should be helping to do these 3 things. We also identified kind of 4 kind of core CAV messaging themes. And these are kind of the high level, when Minnesota is talking about CAV, what are the key things we want to communicate? And this came from conversations with partners in industry, as well as drawing from the questions that our Minnesotans had when we engaged with them. And these core messaging themes are about innovation, safety, equity, access, and mobility, and economic and workforce development. So more guidance on those and kind of talking points specific to those are part of what we're pulling together as part of these final deliverables. Some other messaging guidance that isn't necessarily a theme or a goal, but is kind of will be in this document kind of to help shape how people talk about CAV moving forward, is really to focus on informing, not selling. Recognizing that we need to build up to connected and automated vehicle as terminology, that people aren't familiar with that yet. So how can we meet people where they are now with the terminology they're using, and use our interactions with them to bring them towards the preferred terminology. Incorporating connected aspects of CAV technology more, since they are aspects that people are less familiar with. Including the full range of CAV application. A lot of people see CAV as just Teslas or just SOV. And so how do we bring in and show that CAV can be so much more than that? Looking at related topics like shared use mobility, electrification. People's perceptions tend to mirror the success of local projects, and just highlighting the connection of all the work to Minnesota's broader CAV program. We'll have some implementation guidance here that will help follow MnDOT's public engagement planning steps, and what are the kind of CAV specific considerations at each of these steps to kind of help incorporate CAV into engagement that is part of transportation projects. And just kind of some other engagement guidance, like prioritizing exposure to CAV via demonstrations, looking for opportunities to engage people beyond industry partners. Digital engagement, specifically Facebook and YouTube, is where a lot of Minnesotans are getting information, but also making sure to emphasize non-digital strategies, especially for rural communities. and just a recognition that people want to be involved, but we've got to use tactics other than public meetings. So I mentioned this a little bit, but we will be pulling together kind of messaging and talking points and kind of creating an easy to use guide for project managers, communicators, other professionals that kind of want to know what do I need to say about CAV, or what should I be saying about CAV as I'm out there talking to people. We also are pulled together, this is kind of another aspect of the project, another deliverable, is looking to create a kind of a strategic recommendations that will help enhance CAV communications and engagement programmatically within Minnesota. So the first stuff I talked about was kind of more that tactical guidance, and this is really looking at that strategic guidance. What are some things we can do that will just really elevate, CAV communications and engagement? So we'll be looking to update messaging and branding, create and maintain a resource library, revise the Minnesota CAV web presence, enhance some of the baseline survey data, conduct regular surveying to track people's perceptions over time, launch a multi-agency communications working group, implement stakeholder management and a newsletter, prioritize CAV demonstration projects, develop CAV ambassadors, champions, and thought leaders within communities, develop community advocates, launch a CAV Equity Community Advisory Committee, and participate in industry events. And there'll be a lot more detail about what all of these mean. I just wanted to highlight you can see the stars on this are meant to show that the Innovation Alliance Outreach and Education Committee and this group are some of the people identified to help champion and move some of this work forward as the plan comes out. So just a few other things, as I mentioned, implementation on some of these things has kind of already started or is already in action. So just wanted to highlight a few things that we're also going to be pulling together related to that. One is the MedCity Mover. We used a lot of this preliminary guidance to inform the communications and engagement around the MedCity Mover. So we're going to be pulling that together in a case study to kind of show how can this guidance be applied to a real life project. As Tara mentioned, one of the things that the Outreach and Education Committee is kind of prioritizing to work on first is developing some general templates and materials. Some of the ones that have been identified as needs are a kind of a template presentation focused on public audiences, one focused on industry audiences, some general handouts, as well as infographics, and kind of an open question for you all and everyone we talked to about what else do you need? What are those materials that could really help you when you're out there talking about CAV? And lastly, I'm just going to briefly touch on this because Gina and Ashley are going to dive in a lot more, but the Learn, Drive, Shape work that the Outreach and Education Committee is working on is also kind of helping to move it forward some of these strategic recommendations, and we'll be drawing from this guidance. So more on that here shortly.
Thank you, Katie. As you guys can all see, a lot of work has been going in over the last couple of years. A lot of information that we've gathered, a lot of data, and a lot of analysis. And so really looking forward to putting it into action. I'm going to note that we're going to pause for questions after this next presentation. Then we're going to divide up into breakout groups where we can have some discussions about some of the presentation that Katie just gave, as well as what Gina and Ashley will be providing here. So hold your questions here just for a couple minutes, and we'll get to those and have some really good discussions. So I believe now we're going to hand it over to Gina Voss of CTS, and she's going to share a little bit about what's been happening on the other side of Innovation Alliance Committee, and look forward to hearing more about that.
Great. Yes, thank you very much, Tara. And it's great to be with all of you this afternoon to share a little bit more about the committee's work on how we want to move forward with this work that Katie was just talking about. And as we're thinking about planning and delivering some engagement activities, both for both the public and the our stakeholders, we just really want to resonate how important it is that we have these key messages. So, the activities that we're working on in the Outreach and Education Committee really need to go hand in hand and need to be tandem, so that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not creating new messaging every time we go out and work with the public or with our stakeholders. So we have been, as Tara mentioned, our group has been working and has been in several different, divided things into several different buckets. And so we've kind of had the messaging and the communications groups, and then we've also had 3 groups working on activities related to public demonstrations, related to development of a conference and a tech showcase. So how do we leverage what we've learned from the communications and messaging products and work, so that we are able to better reach out to the groups and to the public, again, to continue this education process. And when we talk about stakeholders, it's not just our traditional transportation stakeholders, but it really is, who are those groups that we're maybe meeting infrequently with, or maybe even not at all, around transportation, both challenges and opportunities. So we're going to share with you recommendations, as I said, focused first around demonstrations, and I'm going to turn to Ashley Hudson, who is with Bolton and Menk, who along with Shaker Raban from MnDOT were the co-leads for our public demonstration working group. And so she's going to share, excuse me, she's going to share 3 types of demonstration initiatives that we are proposing. This work we're proposing would happen over the next 18 months. Ideally, most of it will happen in 2022, but just recognizing that some things may carry over into calendar year 2023. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ashley to talk a little bit about Drive, Learn, and Shape.
Thank you, Gina. I think too, before I dive into any details, I'll give you a little understanding of the format that went on with sort of the subgroup of the Outreach and Education Committee that was charged with planning and prioritizing demos for 2022. There was about 11 of us. Myself and Shaker got the opportunity to co-lead on this. And what that really looked like is there were 3 meetings and that we pulled together in like late summer, early fall of this year. Wow, COVID time really messes you up with some of that. And the first meeting was all about brainstorming all of the different demo ideas across the state of Minnesota, with really a prioritization on greater Minnesota, recognizing that a lot of demos to date have been done in the metro area. And so in that first meeting, we then took all of our brainstorming, really documented that, and then used some polling to be able to prioritize that and see what was the most important from the group to accomplish in 2022. Again, our focus was really this next year, knowing we can't accomplish everything, but what are the top things that we need to accomplish over the next year to 18 months. Meeting number 2 was then coming together and reviewing those recommendations. And this is where these buckets that you see really came out of. And then being able to kind of talk through a little bit more of the details of what these buckets means, and the group kind of accepting that and being all on the same page with this is what we want to move forward. And then meeting number 3 was getting back together with the larger Outreach and Education Committee and presenting these recommendations and getting their feedback and working that into the recommendations that we're talking about today. So that's really an overall subset of like how this group worked and how these recommendations came about. So just to give high level on what these buckets mean, and I know Gina alluded a little bit to them, is that, and really want to emphasize too that this demonstration planning group didn't try to or attempt to figure out every detail and everything that needs to be done or exactly how they're going to be done with each demonstration type. But more so create a framework that then can be taken on by consultants or MnDOT to figure out more detail and to facilitate and deliver. And so Drive is really about focusing on the champions and decision makers, otherwise known as like transportation professionals and elected officials. and allowing them to see the technology, share some data findings, talk about policy guidelines. Learn is really focused on the general public and again, really greater Minnesota, and going to them in, in community events, and different opportunities of, where they're already gathering to build awareness on CAV. Similar to what the Med City Mover is doing and the demonstration or having the Med City Mover shuttle at the state fair. Similar type situation as that. SHAPE is really a deeper dive and intentional to be focused around conversations with traditionally underserved communities to understand their unique needs and concerns. So we can dive into the next slide. So here's where we're going to get into a little bit more detail on each recommendation. And these next few slides will highlight the framework that the demo planning subgroup shaped up to guide the next steps to deliver these in 2022. And with each bucket, the framework really focuses on a description of what this demonstration type is, the target audience, the timing and sequencing that's suggested. How does this best fit into 2022? And then also some high-level measures of success, and probably one of the most important things is, why do we need to do this recommendation now? So for time's sake, though, and allowing time for opportunity of discussion around this, I'm really going to focus on the description, the target audience, and the why now. Also recognizing that Gina's going to wrap this up with the conversation really of how this is proposed across 2022 timeline and how these all fit together. So for Drive Minnesota, again, this is going to be like a very technical and policy-oriented activity to really show, CAV readiness, where CAV technology is at, where it's going, to gather and share data and infrastructure vehicle interaction while traveling to target communities, and then to share current policy guidelines. And so the intention is to really utilize like a drive test vehicle, such as the VSI vehicles, to travel to greater Minnesota communities, collect data along the way, to be able to share findings with them and have conversations around, maybe a high level like readiness analysis of their community, and what are the current policy guidelines that are available. And so, as we already alluded to, the champions or the target audience there is the champions and decision makers. And really importantly, the why now for Drive Minnesota suggestion and recommendation is that soon this will be the first time that agencies have recommendations with the MUTCD administered by FHWA, the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices around CAV planning and CAV recommendations in that framework. And then really like surrounding the ability to follow up with the communities that participated in the CAV scenario planning workshops in 2018. And this is a great opportunity to travel back to them in this sort of demonstration format to talk about, what has evolved and where are we at with things today. And this is a point where I want to pause before we jump into the details of the other ones. And I want to reach out to co-chair Phil Magny to briefly share how this similar demo style was utilized in a Drive Utah that VSI did.
Hi, Ashley, you want me to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, just give a brief,
Okay.
similarity to
Excellent.
this recommendation.
Yeah, the drive programs can be very, very successful, and we've been doing them for several years now. And initially it was for purposes of accommodating various demonstrations and meetups and things like that, with a lot with state agencies. By the way, as we're traveling across country and we reach out to the agencies, they are so hungry for learning more about this. We come by with the vehicles, we have great discussion, we talk to them about the technologies and all that other stuff. But within the last year, we've been able to leverage the data that we collect when we do these drives, and that data has a lot of different use cases. Traditionally, the use cases might be to train your algorithms or to test your algorithms. But there's another use case that we have embarked on, and that's to examine the interaction between CAV vehicles and the infrastructure. And a lot of great insight can come from that. And so with this Drive Minnesota program, we are essentially going to be recording pretty much all the 1,000 miles of roadway, and we will be able to evaluate it from a high-level standpoint, as well as we can go as deep as we need to actually look at call out areas of roadway that we feel might not be compatible with CAV for various reasons, for example. So yeah, we've got a couple of vehicles. I think we're set up to bring them both, but we very much look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that comparison to how it's already been successful in the past.
Ashley, before you move on, there was a comment in the chat about, especially for Drive Minnesota, that when we're meeting with elected officials, that we also make sure that we are including representation from Minnesota's tribes as part of the Drive Minnesota.
Yep, absolutely. Move forward to. Okay, so now talking a little bit in more detail about Learn Minnesota. So this is to continue to build awareness with the general public, and for the first time again, and with a focus on these efforts in Greater Minnesota, especially with there being a significant need for more transportation options in rural communities and support to the aging population, and things to address like that. So I know I sort of combined my description and target audience in there, but I'd also like to add that the group's brainstorming discussions, the recommendations that came through is that it's best to target Greater Minnesota audience by bringing demos to already occurring events such as city celebrations, days, county fairs, tribal gatherings, etc. So really focusing on where people are already gathering. And why is it important to continue to build awareness with the general public now? Just to continue to show that CAV is a transformative and evolving technology. We want to be able to highlight the current pilot projects that can be experienced in other communities that are ongoing right now, such as the Med City Mover in Rochester, and the demo that's about to be deployed in Grand Rapids as well too. And also take that as an opportunity to gather public feedback and share that collected public feedback with the specific community of the area that the demonstration is happening, and so that can help guide future planning and testing and deployment processes and decisions that happen in the future. If you want to move to Shape Minnesota, the next one. So Shape Minnesota is really to build awareness with the underrepresented groups and facilitate really in-depth conversations to discover their unique needs and concerns as it relates to CAV deployment. This will specifically target BIPOC communities, people with disabilities, and the elderly. And what I personally love about this bucket is it's really intended to be less about, I mean, there is sharing of information and education needed across all buckets, but this one is really intended to be about these specific groups educating us on their unique needs and opportunities. These groups really are those that have the most to gain from CAV technology, and so it's really important that they're engaged early, so that nothing is missed and there's no improper deployment that sort of exaggerates already existing barriers or potentially creates new ones. So why is it important to continue with this now is it's a lot of the similar reasons here, that, CAV is transformative and evolving and talking about the pilot projects, but then also really to dive deep into helping address both known and maybe some unknown gaps in transportation options, particularly for these groups, and recognizing that, that they're often sometimes the most vulnerable populations in communities that often get overlooked, and that those conversations need to occur early. And really the idea around this is to utilize the shuttle similar to like the Med City Mover to take that and to demonstrate that and the ability that has in a community, and have those in-depth conversations around what it can do, where it's going, and what would really benefit specific groups. And so with that, before I hand it back over to Gina, I wanted to stop and ask, I know that there's some additional members that were a part of this demo planning group, or just in general, if anybody wants to chime in on the process and recommendations that came out. Got nothing? You can take it over, Gina.
Great, thanks, Ashley. Great job putting this together, and just wanted to share a brief anecdote I think about the importance of these types of engagement activities. So when we held the CAV Career Pathways Camp this summer in White Bear Lake, and it was with about 20 high school students. We started out teaching them about kind of the abstract concepts, but it really did not hit home for them until they were able to actually step onto an automated shuttle and ride it. And at first they were kind of joking, well, it looks like a kiddie ride, we're just going to be in the parking lot. But when they got on the vehicle and saw that it was moving, that there was no driver, that it was not being controlled by anyone in the vehicle, it really opened their eyes to what the technology can do, as well as the possibilities for how it could be used in the future. One of the other things that I think the students were really proud of, and that we hope to continue to advance, is they said, it's really great to know that Minnesota is doing this type of work. They said, we always hear about what's happening in California or in Arizona, but we don't really hear a lot about what's going on in Minnesota with this. So they really, again, were proud of the fact that Minnesota is doing doing work in this area, and we're excited about that. So now I want to turn, if we could go to the next slide, wanted to talk a little bit about more, again, of our on the stakeholder engagement side of things. It's been 4 years since CTS convened a strategic visioning retreat for Minnesota around connected and automated vehicles. And since that time, we do get presentations and information shared at important conferences like the Minnesota's Transportation Conference, the Minnesota Towards Zero Deaths Conference, the CTS Research Conference. But we really haven't had an activity or an event that brings everybody who is interested and who we want to connect with around CAV together to share information. And so our committee thinks it's really important in moving forward with launching during 2022 a CAV conference, and to go along with that, a tech showcase. And really the objectives that we've identified for these activities is to engage stakeholders that are interested in CAV, to shine a spotlight on the initiatives and the research that's going on in Minnesota, as well as to give us a chance to hear what's happening at the national level and in other states. So what can we learn? What can we model? What are some of the pitfalls that we maybe want to try to avoid? We want to be able to showcase, Minnesota companies and academic institutions, as well as companies and others who are interested in doing CAV-related business in Minnesota. And this final bullet is something that I'll be interested to get feedback and hear more from the council about, is we're also proposing that as part of this, that there would be a half-day workshop to develop strategies. And we're proposing, it could be around advancing CAV policies and legislation. Another topic could be how do we best leverage the new funding from the federal government to work in this particular area. So we're proposing that we would have a 2-day that these would happen one right after another. So we'd have a CAV conference on day 1 and then a CAV tech showcase on day 2. And I think another thing for us to consider, it looks like we lost the slides.
Actually, Ben, if you want to advance a slide, I think there we go.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm still seeing the somebody climbing a steep cliff, which is very interesting. But so
Ben,
let's
might
see.
stop sharing and then resharing. That might help if there's anyone maybe not connected to the same MnDOT server. Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Gina.
Yes, I'm going to try to pull up so I can keep going here.
Is it showing up now?
I can see it.
Okay. Let me see. There we go. Yes, sorry about that. Okay. So, so what we're proposing again is that in the summer, June, July timeframe of 2022, we'd host these things, these 2 events together. So day 1 of the conference would be a combination of general and concurrent sessions. We build the concurrent sessions around the topics of the focus areas for the Innovation Alliance Committee, as well as other ideas. And we'd solicit both presentation ideas as well as planning committee members from the Advisory Council, the Innovation Alliance committees, as well as the interagency group on CAV. And so again, this would be really focused on information sharing. And then on day 2, we would propose that there be a workshop and a tech showcase that would be held concurrently. And, to consider that for the workshop, it would be 50 to 60 participants that would be identified by the planning committee. And again, with the idea of having facilitated discussions to identify and prioritize some strategies and action items for advancing CAV policies and legislation. We'd also, at the same time, the tech showcase would be going on. It would be open to all of the conference registrants. Again, with the idea that it would be a showcase to include demonstrations and exhibits, and at a facility that would allow us to accommodate both indoor and outdoor activities. And one of the questions that we've wrestled with, and again, I think we may want to wait to make the decision until after we've had these events. But is this something that should happen? Should both of these happen on an annual basis? Should we rotate them and do them every other year? How do we ensure that we're continuing to keep the transportation community as well as our other key stakeholders informed about the work and the efforts that are going on with CAV in Minnesota? So with that, I think we can turn to the next slide. So this slide just really kind of shows, lays out, I guess, maybe in more graphical form, what we're looking at from a timing standpoint based on the elements that Ashley and I just talked about. With Drive Minnesota happening in May, the conference and showcase in June, Learn Minnesota beginning after the conference and showcase and running, likely spilling into a little bit of 2023. And then with Shape Minnesota starting that in the fall, and again, having that run through April of 2023. So CTS and our partners have been talking with MnDOT about how we can move forward with implementation of these initiatives, and how can we help support CAVX staff in delivering these efforts. So with that, I will stop talking, and if we're going to have questions, yes, have questions, and then happy to answer those as needed.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Katie. Very exciting, all of the work that you guys have been doing, and the effort you guys have put in. So just want to thank you all for your leadership in this area. So now our goal for a little bit of questions to try to hit on what the council members have asked of a little bit more engagement, and recognizing we have a number of people that are in this meeting today. We are going to separate into breakout groups. So I have hopefully successfully set up 2 different breakout groups that will allow for conversation between council members and ex officio members, and then those that are not ex officio members or council members will remain in this room. So we will have Thomas Johnson Kaiser leading that group in this room, and then myself and Ben will lead those other 2 groups to answer these questions that you see here on the screen. Can go back to some of the information that Katie presented. We could talk about what Ashley presented or Gina did. So really it's up to you all to kind of let us know what stood out to you, what questions you might have, where are the opportunities you see for us really implementing this moving forward. So I'm going to get those breakout rooms started here, but just want to remind folks, do not click the leave button when we are done. If you click the leave button, you will not return to the main meeting. So if that does accidentally happen, just make sure you find your meeting notice and you can go ahead and click to rejoin the meeting here as we come back. Also, I will note as we come back to the meetings, if you can remind everybody to remute in the large group. It's not always great when we have everybody talking coming back into that collective group. So just a couple of reminders there. And then lastly, I'll just note when we come back, we'll do a little report out and hear a little bit more discussion. So if you didn't get an opportunity to weigh in the breakout rooms, hold tight and we might have some more opportunities here as we have a little bit of time. So Ben and Thomas, I think our plan is to do 15 minutes of breakout rooms and return here at 4 p.m. Does that sound correct?
That's right.
All right, I'm going to start those up. And so you will see yourselves being moved to other rooms potentially. And just look forward, if you end up, whatever room you end up in, have a good conversation.
Hi, folks. Share my screen here to get those questions pulled up. All right, is everyone able to see the breakout questions?
Yep.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, so hopefully that was clear. We have a lot of great information presented to you all today. So I'll just kind of leave it open to the group to have some good dialogue here. We have some of the experts in here with Katie and Ashley and others. So I'm sure they'll be very happy to hear any feedback you all have. So I'll just open it up to the group. We don't have to go through these questions one by one. Feel free to jump into any of these questions. What stands out to you, any questions you have, what's most surprising or interesting. You see this type of guidance informing your work, or what other guidance you need. So I'll open the group to see who wants to jump in first. If I don't get any takers, I will call on shortly. Frank, I see you're off mute. Do you have any initial thoughts on the discussion or any of these questions?
Well, it seems I've heard this before. The recommendations that I know of that have been coming out of the university for a while here have been that we pay attention to talking about the new ways and new opportunities to deploy these technologies and get those demonstrations out there. We mentioned Grand Rapids, and we mentioned Med City Mover. I believe White Bear Lake is still on track as well. Maybe Thomas, you know better than me. But to get that technology out there so that people get an impression that this technology can be used in ways that can make a positive difference for those who have had negative experiences with our current transportation system. I think that, so I endorse that continues to be the direction and the focus of the work here. You know, whatever I can do within my capacity at the university to continue to move that forward, I'm definitely up for.
Thanks, Frank. Other thoughts from folks? Alex, Joel, or Sarah, or any thoughts from you all as kind of non-MnDOT or directly involved folks on the call here?
You know, I'll weigh in just in an overarching way. You know, people like Sarah and I represent companies. I represent Uber. And so we're more of a conduit of getting information back to our client than giving you what our opinions are about it. And so it's not that we're not paying attention or not listening, but you don't really want to get over your skis in this business. So you'll probably hear a little silence from us, but it isn't because we're not paying attention or interested.
Thanks, Joel. Other thoughts? I think Eric, I maybe saw you on mute. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was really interested in the survey results and, you know, the sort of division between those who are fine with it and then others who are not so good with it. And I think one of the reasons somebody gave for not being okay with it was, well, other people aren't going to know how to use this technology, you know, so I think, you know, I've always been comfortable with it, but when I went to Las Vegas and actually rode in, I think it was a Lyft vehicle that had, you know, it was fully automated and of course had a safety driver, but there was another car that pulled in front of us, and yet the vehicle we were in, you know, was able to brake accordingly, and there was no crash. And so I really do feel like just getting more people into vehicles, automated vehicles, really can help change minds. I mean, we heard that in the presentation too, that, you know, it's kind of like the light bulb almost goes off when they have that first ride in an automated vehicle. So I know we probably can't get all, what do we have, almost 6 million Minnesotans into one, but, you know, if we can just keep trying to do that and targeting, you know, state legislators, I think that's something we've talked about before. You know, where if we're doing like the one in Grand Rapids, for example, make sure that we reach out to legislators within, like, you know, maybe 100-mile radius or something of Grand Rapids and say, please come to Grand Rapids and try this technology.
Thanks, Eric. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to follow up on kind of on that line of thought. It seems like getting the technology in front of people would have a lot of benefit. And it seems like, you know, we've had like a meeting here, a meeting there, kind of scattered shot and pretty minimal. I guess my question is, what kind of scale can you like rise up to get this in front of as many people as possible? It's like, I don't know what our capacity is or what it could reach to get like a lot of people involved.
Thomas, oh, you go ahead, Ashley.
I would say I could maybe help answer some of them, and then Katie's going to be able to hear. I don't know if it helps. Could we maybe jump back to the slide that like had the buckets on it and the different demo types? Because as talked about in terms of like how these recommendations came about and the framework for them, in terms of being able to deliver on them, the next steps is really targeted for employing the help with consultants to work with MnDOT and other organizations to help actually deliver these demonstrations over 2022, recognizing that MnDOT doesn't have the staff capacity to do it all. So that's really the approach on being able to actually get this out and across the state over the course of these different styles of demonstrations that have been recommended. And in terms of the number of them, it's kind of generally been figured out. I think, don't 100% quote me, I don't have them in front of me, but Drive Minnesota, I think the idea was somewhere between like 8 and a dozen communities. Learn Minnesota was somewhere between 13 to 15 different, attending 13 to 15 different community events throughout, mostly throughout greater Minnesota. And then Shape Minnesota, I believe, was at least a half dozen to a dozen meetings across 2022, targeted with specific groups and representatives of underserved populations. So that's really the capacity that was seen for these for 2022.
And the only thing I would just add is part of our recommendations from like the programmatic recommendations is going to be to provide a little bit more guidance on kind of how to prioritize demonstration projects. And one of those factors is how many people is it going to reach, or is it going to reach different audiences than previous demonstrations have reached? So just noting that, like, I think we'll hopefully the recommendations and kind of the final product of all of this will help make sure we are putting our resources in the best places to get this in front of as many people as possible.
I'll jump
Thanks.
in.
Thanks. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, this is Sarah Pasick. I represent Tesla at the Capitol as a contract lobbyist. Similar to Joel, just kind of listening and taking in, but we appreciate the thoughtful approach of this group and kind of the timeline for educating both elected officials and the public prior to just seeking legislation or setting policies on CAV adoption or CAV, anything related to CAV on the streets, and that the approach that this group takes and the commission or the council, we like the way it's going.
Thanks, Sarah. We just have a couple more minutes left, so I want to open up any other thoughts from folks. I can go back to the discussion questions, but any other thoughts from folks in our last minute or two here? There was a question in the chat from Alex regarding demos at the state fair. So we did have the Med City Mover at the state fair for one day this year, just as a static demo, but that was another really great experience where people were very interested and had a lot of positive feedback and just learning more about the technology and the Med City Mover project. So we'll definitely be looking to do some more of that in the future. But yeah, things like the state fair, county fairs, things like that are great places to reach folks who typically might not see it in their day-to-day life. So we have done a little bit of that in the past, but we'll obviously with this drive on the chain, hopefully do more of that in the future.
I'd like to add to that, Thomas, being somebody that helped with that demonstration. I thought it was so cool to see how people interacted with the low-speed shuttle. Especially being able to talk to them about, how low speed it is. And so the safety concerns with that, I think it definitely helped out with that. And I was very surprised in like a happy way of the demographics that were like, this is awesome, and I would totally use that. And it was you know, a lot of elderly, and children were super excited about it too. So I thought that was really cool to see, because sometimes I think that I don't know, some of the elderly might be the most resistant to change or something. They were the group that I found to be most excited that visited that at the state fair, which was super cool.
Yep, I agree. It was a great experience and a lot of good feedback from folks, a wide demographics. So
yep.
I think we just have a minute left here. So thank you everyone for your conversation, and always open to more thoughts and feedback if folks have it. And thanks to Katie and Ashley and others for your presentation and information. We're in the main room, so we won't have to be kicked out or anything. Everyone should just be joining us shortly here.
I'm just going to say that Teams does not do it as well as Zoom yet. You are kind of like at the mercy of the 10-second countdown, and you're in the middle of the sentence, and then you're upside down. So,
yep.
Oh, no one's upside down still, and I apologize. I was trying to figure out how I could chat to Thomas and Ben, and that was not successful. So
it's
we
okay.
practice more of that. So
it was only me in the middle of a sentence. Who could worry, right?
And it was really good stuff too. That's
yeah.
the best part of it. It's always the best stuff right there, isn't it, Commissioner?
Yes, when you're going to get cut off, when you're going to get given the hook.
Yeah. It's
Great,
a fast 10 seconds.
Ben, I'm just going to ask everyone to remind themselves to mute coming back into this group. So if they're accidentally doing something on the side, that we don't accidentally hear them as well. And I think we're going to do a little bit of sharing of what we heard and have a little bit more discussion here before we wrap up for the day.
I just put up the questions again for everybody. Thank you all for participating in that. This is something we haven't done as much of, so thank you for your patience with the technology there. But hopefully you had a great opportunity to have the start of some conversations, and we'll continue it now here for the next few minutes. What we want to do is do a quick report out from the two groups that had the Governor's Advisory Council members in them, and then kind of maybe a high level overview of what Thomas heard from other participants in today's meeting, and then just kind of an open conversation for the council to kind of wrap this segment up. So Tara, what came out of your group?
Thanks, Ben. So a couple things were really highlighted. I would relate to some of the key messaging to really emphasize the fact that CAV is already here. That if you were to go purchase a vehicle, a new vehicle today, that most of them are likely level 1, level 2 vehicles. So we need to make sure we're not just focusing on the end game, or where you're not, or you're not driving, where you might just be a passenger, and help people understand that there's a role for active driving in CAV today. So I know that that's something that I think Katie's team's been incorporating, but definitely a great reminder and something that I think's an opportunity for all of us to share. It's one of my favorite talking points when people are asking about future cars and Jetsons and things like that. And I'm like, well, it's a little more than that too, and it's what you might be driving today, which is pretty exciting. John Houseladden shared that there in the recent bill that was passed, there's an apprenticeship pilot program that allows professional truck drivers under the age of 18, of 18 years of age to be able to drive with certain driver assist technologies in trucks, which is really exciting. And it's really showing how you can use those new technologies today that provide a benefit and can expand opportunities and career opportunities for folks as well. Another emphasis was to ensure we're focusing on safety and that it's a top priority here in Minnesota. And how do we make sure we can embed CAV messaging into other related technologies so we don't overload our audiences with information as well as with engagement opportunities. So just how we can coordinate some of that work. So lots of opportunities with us to do that. And then we talked a little bit about the conference and tech showcase, really trying to just, I think, emphasize how Minnesota is different and emphasizing perhaps some of those opportunities we might see with CAV from a profession standpoint, what there might be today and what some changes might be that we can plan for as well and create some new opportunities. So really good conversations and really appreciate everybody's involvement and input.
Sounds like it. And the group that I was sitting in on, just a few notes here, just some kind of synthesized ideas. There were multiple people in the group who noted the importance of engaging with rural communities and specifically having an opportunity for rural communities to be able to just better understand the technology, better understand what the possibilities are from CAV, and perhaps even the opportunity to touch, feel, see what CAV is all about. And so looking at all those strategies that were presented, but targeting rural communities. We also talked about similar but the impact on the disability community as well. So that was kind of a theme, just kind of like thinking of specific audiences. But then that kind of broadened out into a bigger conversation that just in general, exposing people to the technology has already proven to open the eyes and excitement of people who may not know what the possibilities that can come from CAV. So specifically, it was mentioned of non-drivers. So for whatever reason, why somebody might not be a regular driver, somebody to be exposed to this technology, it really can unlock some conversations and an excitement that you can build off of as this is being rolled out. So there was also note that while there's engagement and continued engagement within Minnesota, there could be possibility of engaging outside the borders of Minnesota as well, noting the importance of that. And then finally, just how can the council in general continue to roll up its sleeves and contribute to the advancement of CAV? And so we were beginning to have that conversation right at the end. And Thomas, were there any high-level themes that came from the members of the public who are participating today?
Yeah, good discussion in our group as well. Similar themes of just the importance of allowing the public to see and interact with the technology and how that really has a strong impact on folks in their understanding and acceptance and education on the technology. So strong support overall for Drive, Learn, Shape, and just expand the amount of demonstrations and trying to reach as many Minnesotans as possible.
All right. So we have a few minutes here, just bringing everybody back together, especially focusing on council members, ex officio members. Anything else that stood out to you that you feel like the council can build off of this work with education and engagement? And feel free to raise your hand or jump in.
Wondering if folks are thinking it's 4:08 and if we don't have more conversation, we might get out of here a little bit early, which might be true.
That's
we want to
true.
make sure we don't miss some opportunities to chat with you guys about this. Make sure as we move forward into 2022, we're getting the Governor's Advisory Council's direction and moving that in the right way.
Hey, this is Commissioner Phillips up at IRRB again.
Yep.
I just make a quick comment on the civic engagement part. You know, this activity is going to take a lot of resources down the road. And, you know, technology is an interesting thing. You know, it's provided a lot of increased productivity in the private sector that's kept inflation in check for decades. And I know we're going through inflation now, but for other reasons. But basically, technology has really helped. And then in other areas, it initially has provided for more expense, like in education. At the first part of technology in education was nothing but buying computers and whatever, and people weren't seeing the benefits. We've seen some more recently. So I think you need to work on this return on investment or what this is going to do to help people or reduce costs over the long term if we can invest the proper resources now to get this done. And you mentioned a lot of them in our little talk. There was a lot of talk about how this is going to help people with disabilities and whatever. But I think on the financial side, it needs to be, yeah, we're going to be able to do that affordably if we have connected and automated vehicles. And what other ways are we going to actually, in the long term, increase productivity, reduce costs? There needed to be a financial benefit to invest all these resources up front early. And I think that whole messaging to the public and as part of that civic engagement would be really important.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Any other, perhaps final thoughts from the council? If there is none, we did take notes during the breakout session, so those things will be definitely filtered back to the Education and Outreach and Engagement Committee. So thank you all, and this is ongoing. So if something comes back or comes to you afterwards, you know, at our next meeting or between then, make sure you raise it. We appreciate your participation in that exercise. So with that, what we will do is we have an opportunity for people who are not members of the council to provide public comment. We have 15 minutes reserved for this. So if you are not a member of the council but would like to make a comment, this is your opportunity. We just ask that you raise your hand. And if there's a lull in the commenting, I'll offer a final call, and we might close it early, but we'll see what the participation is. So is there anybody who would like to make comments? We have a thank you, so that's always good. Thanks, Joel. All right, well, let me, I'm not hearing anything yet, but I don't want to close any doors. What I'll do is I'll make a final call here. Please raise your hand or chime in either in the chat box or vocally. We want to make sure you have an opportunity. All right, I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so we'll move on to our kind of our final portion of the meeting today. And I know that that there are some upcoming events and some specific highlights of what's coming, and I will have Tara Olds discuss some of those things. So Tara.
So first off, before we end, I just want to thank everybody for their involvement over the last year. I know this is our last meeting, and it's been a lot of fun. albeit virtually, and wish we could meet in person again. But just want to say I thank you for all of your participation. Appreciate all the work you've done, both in these meetings offline and in Innovation Alliance. It's been really exciting to see all of the improvements and the progress we've made here as a state. We do just want to highlight 3 different upcoming events. Our next council meeting isn't going to be until March, so just kind of stay tuned. But with that, we are looking at having a workshop to discuss with council members and ex officio members some brainstorming opportunities on potential partnerships for the IIJ bill. So stay tuned on that. Additionally, I will make note that we will be sending out some CAV 2021 highlights. We were going to share those today, but we wanted to make sure we reserved ample time for discussion. So we'll be sending those out to the council members for review and to see if they have any additional things they want to incorporate into those highlights, because we'll be compiling our 2022 annual report here shortly. So we'll be convening in March after that is due, but we're going to try to coordinate a little bit offline with all of you for that. Another one we wanted to highlight is the Transportation Research Board annual meeting is January 9th through the 13th in Washington, D.C. I know there'll be a number of folks from Minnesota that are attending. I'm actually attending with Katie Caskey to share some work that we've been doing here in Minnesota, which would be really exciting. And I'm sure a number of other folks from the DOT, as well as our CAV space here in Minnesota, will be presenting as well. And then Minnesota Transportation Conference, want folks to be able to mark their calendar February 28th through March 2nd. It's planned right now to be held in person in downtown St. Paul. So a great opportunity for us to highlight some of the work we've been doing here on the council, just learn from some other work that's happening within transportation. So those were a few things we just wanted to make sure we had a chance to highlight. But otherwise, I think we are able to wrap up here, Ben.
Great, thanks, Tara. I will have our co-chairs close the meeting.
Well, let's see. I think Phil's getting back on camera here. I'll just say thank you. You've been thanked a lot today, but the work is important. I know that in emerging technologies, it is often harder to know, are we making progress? Without all of you, we would not be making nearly as much progress as we are making today. And so your input does matter. And I look forward to more of the committee work next year that will kind of draw things closer together. And let's hope sometime early next year we can be in person together, because that would be great. I agree that we just lose those in between moments when we're meeting virtually. It's a great tool. I'm glad it's kept us going, but I too can't wait to be back together in person.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, no, it's been a terrific year. Today's meeting was fantastic, but it has been just a extremely productive year as far as I'm concerned, even though we had to do everything virtually. And from time to time, the question comes up, why do we do what we do? And to the commissioner's point, it's a moving target. The technology is moving so fast. What might have been relevant 3-4 years ago is no longer relevant, but we cannot afford to not do this. Okay. And so that's why, and you look back, 4 or 5 years ago and say, well, what did we do? Did we implement that? Well, we really, it's just difficult. But we cannot afford to not do this. We have to know exactly what's going on, what's coming down the pipe, what the trends are. And then, of course, the engagement with the stakeholders, the communities, and even the people of the state to just make sure everybody's aligned. So, wishing everybody a terrific holiday and safe travels, and that's it for me.
Well, thank you all for your participation. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all. Happy holidays.